Hi guys, it's me Shazza HD and welcome tonight to this preview for this weekend's Monaco Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys are doing well, hopefully from the last Grand Prix, which was for, a Barcelona Grand Prix, pretty good. I have to say, pretty exciting, certainly the first half of the race. Hopefully you're excited for this weekend's Monaco Grand Prix, which could be one, very competitive all over the field. I definitely think it's coming into this race, definitely not a certain field in terms of who could be where, but also the weather may play a factor, as I'll get into soon enough. But yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well, no matter what part of the world you're from, no matter what time it is. Hopefully you're having the best day possibly you can be having. Also, for anyone who didn't join my stream on Tuesday, had eye surgery, of course, on Sunday. Recovery is going well. Vision is not still at 100%, but it does take time for, your brain to rewire, I guess you could say, or just get used to being able to actually see. So it's not going to be very long until I can totally see, but vision already is much, much better than before. And cannot wait for this weekend's Grand Prix. I know people don't look forward to Monaco these days because, lack of overtaking, but I still look forward to Monaco because seeing these cars around Monaco, especially in qualifying, and even at times during the race, because of the sheer challenge of it, is still very interesting and exciting to me. So I am looking forward quite a bit to this Grand Prix. And if it does rain, then we are in for a brilliant weekend of racing. But what we're going to do in this stream is we're simply going to go through all the teams and preview how they are looking going into this Grand Prix off the back, of course, of what happened in Spain, and also look at, what could happen this weekend in Monaco. So we'll get into that in a moment. I just want to first get into the championship standings. So let's go to the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen, of course, from the Spanish Grand Prix, took the lead of the Drivers' standings because of Charles Leclerc's retirement. So Verstappen, coming into this race, leads by 6 points from Charles Leclerc in second place. Sergio Perez is third, not that many points behind. And then you got Russell in fourth, Carlos Sainz fifth, Lewis Hamilton sixth, and then Norris seventh, Bottas eighth, Ocon ninth, and Kevin Magnussen in 10th place. And then in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull now have a 26-point lead over Ferrari. Of course, also in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull taking over for Ferrari there. Red Bull first, Ferrari second, and Mercedes third. Still not that far behind the two teams ahead of the Mercedes, despite having such a poor start to the season. So it does show you that if they get it together soon enough, that they're still in play for a decent finishing position for them. And then McLaren are in fourth on 50 points. Alfa Romeo closing the gap in fifth place, and so are Alpine in sixth, getting exciting between those three teams. And then Alpine and Haas cut away now from those ahead of them in seventh and eighth respectively. And then Aston Martin in ninth and Williams in 10th place. So let's now go on to the teams, and we'll start, of course, with Ferrari, who, last weekend, I was going to say yesterday, last weekend, Ferrari had a great opportunity to take a vital win in Spain. Charles Leclerc was leading by, 12, 13 seconds, was going to win that race if his car didn't fail him, but of course, his car did fail him. Retired from the race, of course, Carlos Sainz made his big mistake in the first 10 laps or so that's why Carlos ended up finishing fourth when he was probably heading for third place if he didn't make that mistake. I know he was behind Russell and Perez after the first lap, but given the pace of the Ferrari, I think he would have finished in third had he not made that mistake once it all shook out in the end. But yeah, that race was a massive blow for Ferrari because it was a track where they had the best car. They definitely had an advantage in the race over Red Bull because of what had happened to Verstappen and even Perez, being held up behind Russell for basically the first half of the Grand Prix. So to lose a certain victory with Charles Leclerc was a massive blow for this team. A Grand Prix, because they, had the best car there and they had to utilize that on the Sunday, that result that they didn't get was such a massive blow for them. So coming into Monaco, what that means is they absolutely have to win with Charles Leclerc this weekend. I mean, with Carlos Sainz, I don't really expect him to do much this weekend, even though I think Ferrari will have certainly a competitive car. Even despite that, you do have to, as a driver, have a lot of confidence within yourself coming to this track if you want to get the best result out of yourself in whatever car you're in. Carlos Sainz doesn't have any confidence at the moment, and because, again, it's a confidence-type track, I don't see Carlos Sainz really getting a great result. I think at best it will be third, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up, say, fifth, or around fifth place in qualifying because of the lack of confidence he has in the car and probably himself at the moment. But with Charles Leclerc, like I said, Ferrari have got to win this weekend. No excuses, none of that. They have got to win. If they don't win this weekend and Max Verstappen, say, does, or at least outscores Leclerc in the race on Sunday, then it's not championship over. I do have to make that clear. It is not championship over if Verstappen was to, say, win and Leclerc finish in second, because the gap would only go up to, 13 points? 12, 13 points, something like that, and it's still very close at that point with so many races left. But given the tracks coming up after this and, the type of tracks that are going to suit the Red Bull car better than the Ferrari car, if they don't win here, Ferrari, I don't see how between now and the summer break they'll be able to close the gap to Verstappen in the championship unless Red Bull's reliability, poor, I would say, reliability record so far this season, if that continues between now and the summer break, then they have a good chance of cutting down the lead or getting back into the lead. But if they don't win this weekend and the Red Bull stays with Max Verstappen, say, reliable enough, like I said, I just don't see how they'll be able to close the gap. And I think Verstappen will start to pull out the gap to a nice and healthy 25, 30 point lead by the time we get to the summer break because of the circuits we have coming up right after this Monaco Grand Prix that certainly Verstappen and Red Bull will be very strong on. So this is a massive moment for them. It really, really is. It's going to show us, will Ferrari be genuine title contenders this season, or will they just fall away basically halfway through the season? Because by the time, let's say, Verstappen does build a 25, 30 point lead by the summer break, then that's basically half a season, isn't it? We're going to find out this weekend. Hopefully, I'm not a Ferrari fan, of course. I'm not a fan of anyone. I'm just a fan of Formula One, really. But for the championship's sake, it would be good to see Leclerc win here. I mean, it'd be very nice to see Leclerc win because it's his home Grand Prix. He's never finished a Grand Prix here in Monaco since he started in Formula One in 2018. And yeah, because he's a home driver, of course, it'd be great to see him win. But from a championship perspective, it would be better if he won, because if Verstappen wins, I think Verstappen is very likely to pull away from Leclerc and start to pull away, say 7 to 10 points each race after this weekend. So hopefully Leclerc is on top form. Hopefully he's not let that reliability failure get him down, and hopefully Ferrari do have the similar kind of pace that they had last year, but also they had last weekend in Spain, because their car, despite what happened in the race, their car was very, very good. And also, one thing that was an issue in Miami and Imola, the two races before the Spanish Grand Prix, which was tyre wear, certainly towards the end of a stint, on kind of a lowish type of lowish grip, say, on the track. Obviously, during the race, the grip on the track builds up with more rubber that goes down. the Ferrari, again, it tended to wore their tyres out towards the end of that first stint. We didn't see that in Barcelona. So it does seem as though Ferrari have got on top of that issue and are not suffering those tyre woes that we saw in the last two races before the Spanish Grand Prix. So the car is there. Leclerc, we know, has the speed and has that type of confidence, especially in himself from what we've seen this season, to go out this weekend and bang in an amazing pole lap and go and get the win. We know he can do it. It's just seeing if it will actually happen. So hopefully, from their point of view, they can have a great weekend. And I'll just quickly move on to this. And yeah, just confirming, Leclerc, 0 finishes at the Monaco Grand Prix in F1. So if he does finish this weekend, it will be his first ever finish for a Monaco Grand Prix. And Ferrari's last win in Monaco was in 2017 with Sebastian Vettel. That year, they locked out the front row in qualifying with Kimi Raikkonen on pole, and then Vettel won from Raikkonen in the race, as they kind of did a bit of a team order switch around, which they kind of had to do for the championship at the time. And, well, if Sainz was ahead of Leclerc on the grid this weekend, and Leclerc was not too far behind Sainz, a second or two behind, up until the first or probably only pit stop of the race that we're going to see this weekend if it is dry, wouldn't be surprised at all, and I would be totally satisfied from a Ferrari perspective if that is what they did, because Leclerc is obviously fighting for the championship and Carlos Sainz is absolutely not. Let's move on now to the Red Bull Racing team. Despite what happened in Barcelona, which was quite a bit of craziness with the DRS issues, Verstappen spinning off into the gravel and thankfully, from his perspective, getting going again, the whole team order situation, it was a very crazy race in Spain for Red Bull. But in the end, it was a 1-2 finish, and it was exactly what Red Bull needed at a track where I think everyone expected Ferrari to get the win, and were going to get the win until what happened to Leclerc did happen. So a massive win there for Red Bull, and especially Max Verstappen. And coming into this weekend, I think they know, Red Bull, that if they do pull off another win, then it's going to be very hard for Ferrari to bounce back in the following races. So I expect Red Bull and Verstappen will be in absolute top form this weekend for what is a critical Grand Prix in the championship. Verstappen, of course, won here last year, qualified second on the grid for last year's Grand Prix. Maybe would have got pole if it wasn't for Leclerc causing the red flag at the end of qualifying last year. So he may have got pole as well. Who knows what could have happened. I know he had a very good first sector from his final lap, but again, wasn't able to complete it because Leclerc caused a red flag. But yeah, if Max is in that type of form we saw last year around this track, and Red Bull can maximize, no pun intended, what they've got as a package, then even if Leclerc beats them, the Red Bull are going to be very close. They are going to be very, very close. And I have to stress, even though I think Leclerc and Ferrari should be the favourites this weekend for victory around here, it's going to be a close fight. It's not going to be a dominant pole position. It's not going to be a situation where Leclerc is leading all the sessions and is, first in Q1, Q2 and Q3. It's going to ebb and flow as the weekend goes on. And when it comes to that final shootout, wouldn't be surprised at all if it was, less than half a tenth separating Leclerc and Verstappen for pole. And when it comes to the fight for pole, which of course is basically the fight for victory unless it rains, it's only going to be realistically between Leclerc and Verstappen. As I'll get onto in a moment with Mercedes, I think Mercedes will be closer than they were in Barcelona, but I don't think it'll be close enough to, to really be on that level of fighting with Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. I think they'll most likely, Russell and Hamilton, be fighting with Perez and Sainz. Perez isn't that great at Monaco in terms of his qualifying efforts. We've seen some great performances from him in the race around this track, but his qualifying efforts, there's been a couple times he's done well. I think 2015 was one where in a quite poor Force India car, I think qualified in 7th place and finished, I think, in 7th place. So he's had good results here in qualifying, but it's not been every single year. It's as usual with him, normally on the race day when he comes alive. Of course, he got a podium here in 2016 with Force India in the wet. If it does rain again, I'm sure he'll be loving that. And last year as well, despite a poor qualifying effort, I think he qualified 8th or 9th last year, came through, showed very good pace and ended up finishing in 4th place and wasn't that far away from a podium in terms of how far behind he was from Lando Norris, who finished in 3rd at last year's Monaco Grand Prix. So with Perez, Perez I think realistically is probably going to end up in that fight with Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, and maybe Valtteri Bottas and the Alfa Romeo for the positions from 3rd, through to 7th place. But yeah, when it comes to the fight for pole, it's going to be Verstappen versus Leclerc, no doubt about it. And like I said, I expect Red Bull and Verstappen will be, because they know it's such an important race and because there is so much pressure on Ferrari and Leclerc this weekend, they know they need to make sure they apply that pressure by being on their A game. And I think they will be on their A game. And I think you will see, even if they don't win, still a very strong performance from the Red Bull team. And I'll quickly show this, that Max Verstappen, his only win at Monaco was in 2021 last year. Fantastic weekend from him. Flawless and very, very quick. And Red Bull actually do have quite a good record in Monaco. They've won the Monaco Grand Prix 5 times. Of course, last year was their 5th victory. And even in the lean years between 2014 and, say, 2018-19, their results here were pretty good. 2014 podium, 2016 second in the race and got pole that year. Should have won the race, really, if it wasn't for a very poor pit stop. If Nib's listening, he'll be banging his head against a desk. 2017 podium, 2018 victory. So this has always been a Red Bull track in terms of results. I mean, the Red Bull car, I wouldn't say suits this track as well as maybe the Red Bull car in terms of its own strengths and weaknesses did in the past. I think the Ferrari car, in terms of where it's strong, suits this track the best. But in terms of history, Red Bull have very good history around here. Now, let's go on to Mercedes, who had an improved weekend in Barcelona, cutting the gap down to the front two teams. And they look to be about half a second closer to Red Bull and Ferrari. Still not quite on the level of competing seriously for podiums and victory on pure pace. I do have to stress that. I mean, Russell was fantastic in the race in Barcelona, but the reason he finished on the podium really was because of Leclerc's problem and Sainz, of course, spinning. Russell deserved the podium. Did he deserve the podium? Well, he deserved a good result, put it that way. Not sure about if he deserved the podium, because I think Leclerc, deserved really the win from that race. But like I was saying, I don't think yet on pure pace Mercedes are quick enough to be definitely getting podiums or certainly getting race victories. But here in Monaco, because it's a shorter lap, they should be closer. I mean, every team will be closer to whoever's on pole because it's a shorter lap. That's always been the case in Monaco. So I'm expecting them to not be that far away. Probably 2.5 to 3 tenths of a second, I think, is the closest they'll get to pole position, which is not that far away. And if they only lose that amount of time per lap during the race, they'll only be, 20 to 25 seconds off the win by the end of the race if there's no safety car. So that's not a massive amount of time really to be losing when you compare that to, 3 or 4 races ago where they were losing a second a lap. So yeah, Mercedes, I think, will have a good weekend. And the only reason I say good is compared to, like I said, what they've been like so far this season. I mean, them only being able really to compete for a podium is still not quite what they want. And obviously, it's not where they should be. They should be fighting for victories, but they're still not not quite there yet, I think. But definitely, like I said a moment ago, because of the quality of their two drivers and because of the improvements their car, or the improvements the Mercedes have made with the car, they definitely will be competing with Perez and Sainz, I think, for the final podium position, as long as, of course, Leclerc and Verstappen finish first and second in whatever order they do finish. But the only thing to point out when it comes to Mercedes this weekend is that they will still be competitive, for sure. They're not going to be clearly third quickest, just too far away from the front two and just about ahead of the midfield. They're going to be competitive, for sure, like I said, for that podium. But because of a certain issue we saw in Barcelona, they're not going to be as competitive as maybe they should be, because they're still lacking a bit in the slow corners. And this is something that Toto Wolff pointed out in Barcelona, that in the final sector, which is pretty much most of it is just slow corners. Oh, it pretty much always slow corners. Maybe you could argue that one of them is a medium speed corner, but it's a very slow final sector. And he, made the point, and it is correct to make the point because the data does show it, that Mercedes in that final sector were quite poor. He did add, and I tend to agree with him on it, that also overheating definitely played a factor in that final sector. Now, in Barcelona, the temperatures we saw were way hotter than normal. I mean, normally the Spanish Grand Prix is a hot Grand Prix, but race day was 37 degrees Celsius. Spain is a hot country, but in May, it's never normally that hot. That's about 7 or 8 degrees hotter than it normally is at the absolute highest in a normal year. Global warming for you. So that definitely played a factor, but it wasn't, I don't think the overheating of tyres was necessarily half or the majority of the reason why they were suffering on a slow corner. So I've got up now. This is the final sector data from Barcelona. So, if we look quickly actually at Sector 1 and Sector 2, the Sector 1, Mercedes, with Russell, they were the quickest in Sector 1, but generally they are pretty much level with Red Bull and Ferrari in the first sector. The first sector is pretty much just about fast, obviously the fast turn 3 and straight line speed or just power. Sector 2 is a mix of, a couple slow corners and a couple medium speed corners and obviously one very fast corner. And in that sector, Sector 2, they are still competitive with certainly Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton, only slightly behind Carlos Sainz and about 1.5, almost 0.2 of a second behind Charles Leclerc. But if you look at the final sector, look how far off they are. 4.5 tenths with Lewis Hamilton, not with Lewis Hamilton, actually 3.5 tenths, sorry, almost 4 tenths of a second with Russell, who was the quickest Mercedes driver in that final sector, against the best time in the final sector of Charles Leclerc. In that final sector, even though those corners are very important, that is a lot of time to be losing, 3.5, almost 4 tenths of a second. Again, overheating would have played its part, but not entirely. Not even probably half the reason why that was the case. And also Lewis Hamilton, half a second slower than Leclerc in the final sector alone. Definitely the slow corner speed of the Mercedes an issue. Will they be able to sort it this weekend? Maybe it's a quick fix, we'll have to see. But it was really the only reason why they couldn't really compete for, say, the win in Barcelona was because their final sector speed in qualifying, and we saw it in the race as well, because the car behind, whoever the car behind was all over the back of them in that final sector. It just wasn't anywhere near good enough. If their final sector speed in Barcelona was only a tenth away from, say, Leclerc or Sainz, Mercedes might have been able to win the race last weekend, but again, it just wasn't anywhere near good enough. And the reason I say look out for Valtteri Bottas, by the way, which I said 2 days ago when I, reviewed or covered what happened in Spain, look at Valtteri Bottas' final sector. It's better than Sergio Perez and the two Mercedes. And not just better than the two Mercedes, it's miles better, quarter of a second quicker than Russell, and pretty much 0.4 of a second quicker than Hamilton in the final sector alone. Now, with Monaco, I'll just cut back here to this. In Monaco, there's not a ton of slow corners, but they are important. So you have the first sector is pretty fast. The corners are pretty fast flowing, and then it's probably the only part of the track where you're most of the time on full throttle. The middle sector, though, the first half of the middle sector into, I think, is it Mirabeau, then the Lowe's hairpin, and then the two corners after that are pretty slow and pedantic corners. Those corners, Mercedes will lose quite a bit of time to Red Bull and Ferrari. And to be honest, in the first sector, I expect Mercedes will probably be equal with Red Bull and Ferrari in those sectors. But like I said, once they get into Mirabeau, the Lowe's hairpin, and then the two corners after that, I think they're going to lose quite a bit of time to those two teams. Then the second half of the middle sector is, pretty quick. But then when you get to the last two corners, it's, again, very slow and can be at times pedantic. And again, two very important corners and two corners where they are still struggling with their slow corner speed. They will lose quite a bit of time. So that's why I say Mercedes are still not quite there yet to compete for pole position, say, this weekend in Monaco. If they were as quick as Red Bull and Ferrari, or slightly slower, say a 1/10.5 or a 1/10 of a second slower in the slow corners, then I'd say, yeah, they are close enough to fight, because you never know what Russell or Hamilton could pull out the bag and maybe pull a bit extra, out of the car than what we think is there. But because of that lack of speed in the slow corners, I just don't think they'll be able to get close enough to fight for pole. But I think they'll definitely get close enough for, like I said, a podium finish. But if they can get another podium, Mercedes, to be honest, I think that would be a pretty good weekend. If it does rain, though, then I think you could see Mercedes have some fun, because in the rain at Imola, in the race, certainly with Russell, their pace was actually pretty good. Certainly much faster than the midfield teams. And given the improvements they've made, they should be even quicker. And also, their race pace is definitely stronger than their qualifying pace. So if it does rain on Sunday, you never know what Mercedes could do, especially with the two drivers they have. And as well, in the last two Monaco Grand Prix that it's been wet, Lewis Hamilton has won the pair of them. So do not count out the GOAT, because he is a master, especially of the wet conditions and around a track like Monte Carlo. Now let's go on to McLaren. I'll get on to McLaren, then we'll come to you guys in the chat to hear what you guys have to say about what I've said so far, and what you think is going to happen for the top teams, especially this weekend in Monaco. But yeah, McLaren should have a decent weekend, I think, in Monaco. Certainly with Lando Norris. We saw with Norris in Spain, despite his tonsillitis, that, it was great of him to battle through that to get some important points for the team, because if he had to, miss that race, then McLaren wouldn't have scored anything, most likely, and Alfa Romeo would have been a lot closer to them in the championship. So good on him for, again, doing the race, pushing through it, and getting some important points. And I think for this weekend, McLaren should have a decent package for this type of track. I don't think they'll have the quickest midfield car. I think that's probably going to go to the Alfa Romeo, certainly in the hands of Valtteri Bottas. But with Norris, I mean, we saw what he did last year, finishing on the podium, and I think he qualified in, was it 5th place in the race? So we know Norris can put in a great lap in qualifying, and we know that he is supremely talented around a street circuit. So if Norris can, hopefully he's fully recovered, he should be by now. Tonsillitis doesn't tend to last, more than a week, to be honest, unless it's a really bad case of tonsillitis. Yeah, Norris, I expect him to be probably top 8 on the grid, maybe at the absolute worst 9th, but most likely he'll be one of the best of the rest, say there with Bottas out of the midfield pack. For Daniel Ricciardo, though, I'm really hoping this year we see a difference, because last year at the Monaco Grand Prix, he was thoroughly embarrassed by his teammate, Lando Norris. Norris, of course, qualified, I think, 5th, finished in 3rd, and got McLaren's first podium at Monaco in like 10 years, I think, to that point. And Ricciardo qualified, 14th or something, and finished only 12th. It was a very poor weekend and was lapped by Lando Norris himself. So, because of his history around Monaco, of course, he won here in 2018, should have won here in 2016, was robbed, really, of victory by his own team at the time, Red Bull Racing. He has to have a big weekend if he wants to keep his seat. If he has a big weekend and can outshine Norris, then it will go a long way to keeping him at McLaren for the future. Cannot afford to have a similar weekend to what he had last year, where Norris is, doing well in the top 10, and then Ricciardo is basically nowhere. Norris is not going to do as well as he did last year, but if Ricciardo is performing at a similar rate to what he was last year compared to Norris, then Ricciardo is probably going to end up, maybe getting knocked out of Q1. Cannot afford to do that this time. He has to be, at worst, like 11th on the grid. At the absolute worst, I think. McLaren, I will admit, McLaren do not have as quick of a car as they had this time last year, but they've definitely got a good enough car to be in the top 10 with both cars. They definitely have a good enough car for that. And thankfully, because obviously Monaco doesn't really have any straights, and if you look at certainly the speed traps, or the speed trap data from the last 2 weekends, McLaren have been quite slow in the speed traps. Even though Lando Norris, if you actually go back and look at those sector times, let me get it back up. Lando Norris was actually 6th in the first sector and Ricciardo 9th, even though I'm pretty sure if you go back and look at the speed trap data, which I did, McLaren were pretty low down in the speed trap itself, so very good speed they had through turn 1, 2 and 3, just didn't have any speed on the straight itself. So thankfully for them, that won't be a problem. And we saw at Imola, a tight and twisty circuit, what they can do. So they've got the car for a decent result, maybe a very good result if it does rain and things play into their hands. So hopefully, from their perspective, and hopefully, just in general, the two drivers are at their best, because there's a lot to, I think, get out of this weekend. And they definitely need to score some points this weekend, because I think with the races coming up after this weekend, it could be a bit difficult for this team because of that lack of straight line speed that they do have. I mean, the Mercedes power unit is really what is responsible for that, but I also think McLaren have a bit too much drag on this car, which is definitely not helping. So, yeah, they've got to maximise the result this weekend, because the next few races could be painful, certainly with the rate of development we're seeing from Alfa Romeo and the type of results we're seeing from Alfa Romeo, and also Alpine as well. But I'll move on quickly back to pictures of the very top teams. And yeah, guys watching, make sure to post in the chat what you thought of what I've said so far, and also make sure to post in there, what do you think will happen for those top teams and drivers this weekend? Who do you think is going to get pole and win the race? Let me know all about that in the live chat. And as well, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And as well, if you do decide to subscribe, if you go and subscribe on the homepage and then go to my community tab, on the second post down, you will see my full Monaco Grand Prix schedule in terms of the content I am doing. I'll let you know if you don't want to go there and look. I'll let you know what it is anyway, at least for tomorrow. So tomorrow, I'm live 3 times. First for practice 1 to watch along that session, and then a watch along of practice 2, and then a qualifying preview on Friday night. The timing for the first practice watch along is 12:45 PM UK time, and then 3:45 PM UK time for the second practice watch along, And then the qualifying preview will be at 8 p.m. UK time. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for that. And as well, smash the like button, share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 for more content like this. And by the way, great to see so many people here. Great to see you all here. I'll get to reading some of your comments. Evening, everyone. McLaren F1 Race, Aline, Faith, Thomas, Karsten Sorensen. Glad to hear you're doing well, mate. Thank you very much. With that, McLaren F1 Race is good. They've scrapped the day off on Friday in Monaco. It was weird. I think it was a bank holiday. The reason they do that. Obviously, the Monaco Grand Prix this year is actually taking place a week later than usual. Usually, the Monaco Grand Prix would have taken place last weekend. I'm pretty sure last year it was the second to last weekend of May was the Monaco Grand Prix. So, yeah, I think if it happened last weekend, there would have been a break on the Friday. I think it's because, like I said, of a bank holiday on the second to last Friday of the month or something like that. But yeah, because it's the last weekend of the month, I don't think that's a factor. And yeah, they've left the track today to all the F2 and F3 runners, and I think the W Series possibly. I'm not sure if they're racing this weekend. It'd be great if they were, to be honest, to see them going around the streets of Monaco. But yeah, it's good that we don't get that break in between, because I think in the past, having practice on the Thursday and then a break on the Friday, sometimes what happened on the Thursday practice, practice 1, practice 2, by the time we get to Saturday, the track is, just not in the type of condition that it would be normally the day after the first 2 practice sessions. So it can end up being a different story once you get to qualifying days. So it's good that, what we'll see from practice 1 and practice 2, it won't be all over the place or completely reset or anything like that. For qualifying, Tonka says taking bets on how many crash out in qualifying. Well, Nicholas Latifi, you can definitely put to that. Music Monster Man says certainly Sainz at least. Yeah. I don't want to be honest, do I feel a bit sorry for him? In a way, I feel sorry for him because he's got the talent. I know he's got the talent. Carlos Sainz should be third in the championship, really, given how good the Ferrari car has been this season and given the talent he has. But I can't feel that sorry for him because he has been poor this season. First 2 races was decent. Yeah, first 2 races, decent. Maybe you could say good. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but okay, let's say good. Probably did the best he could, really. And then really from Australia on, he's just been very poor. Made so many amateur silly mistakes. Australia, obviously he got sent out late because of some kind of, power unit glitch or some kind of issue. Then made a mistake on his final lap on the exit of the turn 11-12 fast chicane. And then, like I've said previously, his spin in the race was so amateur. It was something you would see in F2 or F3. It was really very poor. And then Imola, of course, spun out and crashed in Friday qualifying. Didn't really hurt him in the sprint. But then in the race, punted himself and Ricciardo out of the race. Miami, he made a mistake in practice, but in the end, I guess got it right enough that he could have a good result in Miami. Second in qualifying and third in the race, even though his third was benefited a lot by Sergio Perez's sensor issue on his power unit. Probably wouldn't have finished in third had it been for had Perez had a reliable power unit there. And then, Spain I thought was especially poor. Qualifying, I thought he did the best he could, really. Maybe, and I even brought it up a couple of days ago, probably there is an argument that he could have outqualified Verstappen, given the issues Verstappen had at the end of qualifying there, but realistically, because of how good Leclerc and Verstappen are, third is realistically where Carlos is going to qualify most times than not. But then the race, I just thought he was very poor. The spin, same with Verstappen, the spin was a very poor mistake. And then Carlos's pace after that was, I thought, not until really the final stint was very poor as well. Wasn't getting his way through the traffic that quickly, which I think really points to, after that spin, just having no confidence. And I think at that point his head was gone. So, yeah. For this weekend, I would not, and it's a shame to say because he's done well here at Monaco in the past. Second last year. He's had plenty of points finishes here. He's a very good driver in Monaco. But given his confidence at the moment, it does look likely that he is going to be someone who ends up binning it because he's having to push, obviously, to be up there for Ferrari and to help the team, but he just doesn't have the confidence in what he has and what he has in himself. Let me look for some more comments here if I can. McLaren F1 Race says, you're right, Shazza, forgot who it was, but one of the Sky pundits in the practice reckoned the Mercs looked quicker in the slow medium speed corners and curves in Barca. Your thoughts? Yeah, whoever said that is, I mean, maybe to them it didn't look, or it looked better, say, than it did previously, say, at a previous Grand Prix. But if you look at the data, the Mercedes is better in the higher speed corners than it is in the slow speed. Certainly it was in Barcelona, so that's, completely false in terms of people saying, oh, they looked better or very, very good in the slow corners, because the data just doesn't show that. And yeah, I think the reason definitely the fast corners for them look so good is because they've sorted out the porpoising. And also, I think they've added a couple upgrades that have settled down, certainly, the rear end of the car, which definitely was a problem in the first couple of races, where the rear end would step out quite a bit and wouldn't allow the drivers to really push it as hard as they wanted to. So that's, I think, why Mercedes, definitely in the middle sector and the first sector to a certain extent, were pretty competitive. But yeah, the slow corners, still not quite there. Someone in chat saying if it rains, George will win. Given his current form, it'll definitely be in there if it is raining, for sure. Tatis, I think it is. How is Merc fastest on straights if Merc engine is to blame? The reason, I believe, in fact, what I'll do is I'll just quickly get up a speed trap data from Barcelona, because I think it'd be easier if I show this to illustrate what I'm talking about. But the reason I believe that the Mercedes works team at least have improved on this is because they brought a new front and rear wing to Miami, the race before Spain, of course, and they cut, I think, a bit of drag off a car that was affecting things. So let me just get up the maximum speeds from Barcelona, and I'll just quickly do this. So, and I'll just zoom in a bit. So if you look at this, oh no, let me scroll down. So these are the maximum speeds from Barcelona, as you can see there from qualifying. So this speed trap is at the end of the pit straight. Let me just check that it is showing on my screen. Yeah, it is. This speed trap on the far left is the speed trap at the end of the pit straight. Lewis Hamilton, very, very quick in that sector, which I have to say, that speed, he must have had a slipstream or something to be that quick in that sector. But also Russell in sixth, and the two Williamses up there. We have noticed that the Williamses have been quite fast on the straights, and I think that's because they just don't have, in general, a lot of downforce. They're not really, obviously, if we don't have a lot of downforce, then drag, I don't think is going to be that much of an issue, to be honest. But if you look at the other two Mercedes-powered teams, McLaren and Aston Martin at the bottom, look at Ricciardo 15th, Norris 18th, and then the two bottom at Aston Martin, way slower than the two Williamses and the two Mercedes. Also, the finish line, you can see Hamilton up there, Alex Albon up there, but again, the two McLarens and the two Aston Martins, and even Russell, way down. And then you've got the two intermediates there. And again, you've got McLaren quite slow in there as well. Now, you may say, well, maybe it's just that McLaren and Aston Martin are both running a bit too much drag, but that's unlikely in F1 to get two teams who have that similar of a problem to a similar extent. Mercedes, obviously, they've got it's a works car, so they will probably have maybe earlier access to more power if they can find it before the engine freeze comes in very, very soon. But also, like I said, they've brought a new front and rear wing to Miami that has cut a bit of downforce off. Because if you go look at the speed traps in Miami as well, we started to see Hamilton and Russell performing a lot better in the speed traps, the main speed trap and the finish line speed trap in Miami as well, right after that upgrade was brought to the car. So, yeah, that's why that is the case. So the Mercedes power unit is still not quite good enough, but Mercedes, from their perspective, thankfully they found a solution, which is just cutting a bit of drag there. Right, let's find some other comments here. By the way, to answer Mr. President's comment, the race is on Sunday afternoon for us. So in the US, if you are in the US, it'll probably be Sunday morning. Like, it depends what coast you're on, but between between 6 and 8 a.m. probably. Again, it depends what coast you're on. Blue Racer says, I feel we could get a surprise non-top team pole position. Alpha are ridiculously quick in slow speed corners, so Bottas could be in the mix on Friday. Yeah, like I showed earlier, I might as well show a different team rather than the Ferrari. Like I showed earlier with Bottas in the final sector, he was pretty much as quick as the two Red Bulls in the final sector and was only about a 10th away from Ferrari. So, and we know Valtteri can pull out a great qualifying lap around pretty much any track. We've seen at plenty of classic tracks he's been able to do it. Silverstone plenty of times. The Nürburgring in 2020, Imola in 2020. He can do it. And in this car, he definitely has a lot of confidence, and he's got a new lease of life in the Alfa Romeo team. Has no pressure that he had at Mercedes. So, yeah, I think, and I've always said pretty much since my review on Tuesday that you've got to count Bottas as a dark horse for this weekend for a possible podium, because let's say Mercedes are maybe not as quick as I think, and Sainz and Perez are a bit inconsistent. There might be a bit of an open door there for Bottas to slot himself in and get a third or a fourth in qualifying. It could happen. Valtteri, I think, was only 2 or 3 tenths behind Hamilton or Sainz, or Perez, sorry, who were 5th and 6th in qualifying in Spain. And obviously in Monaco, the gaps between all the cars are always closer because it's a shorter track. So if he pulls out a great lap and Alfa Romeo can continue showing the pace they have, you never know. You never know what could happen. So you've got to remember Valtteri Bottas when it comes to contenders, certainly surprise contenders. Mr. President asks, what is the chance of pole position for Russell? I'd probably say 20%, no more than that. I'd be very surprised if he got pole position, to be honest. Right. I'll read out probably 2 or 3 more comments and then we'll get to the rest of the teams. And also a couple little news stories towards the end. Music Monster Man, what's the main reason you reckon science has been poor this season? The only reason I can think of, actually 2 reasons, is one, maybe the car doesn't suit his driving style as much, which could be a factor, because Leclerc, I mean, if the car is, say, built more towards Leclerc, it could be hampering him, because Leclerc does have a different type of driving style. Carlos is an aggressive driver, but he's not as aggressive as Leclerc. And, I mean, you can see when Leclerc drives the car, he does throw the car about quite a bit. Carlos doesn't quite do that as much. He's a bit smoother than Charles is. So it could be that. It could be just a bit too loose on the rear end. Could be just a bit too snappy, the rear end. Spin too easily. Maybe that's why he spun in Australia, spun in Imola, and spun in Spain. It could explain a lot. But I think the second reason is most probable is that, so last year, I mean, he had pressure to a certain extent, you know, to prove himself that he was good enough to be at Ferrari and replace Sebastian Vettel, who, of course, had a decent, you know, time at Ferrari, or a good time compared to most who have been at the team. And he did prove himself. But the thing is, because Ferrari were a midfield team still, he didn't have the pressure of, you know, what other Ferrari drivers in the past have had, and Charles Leclerc has already had to deal with, which is driving a Ferrari consistently in the front 3 positions. That's a different type of pressure. That type of pressure has now been applied this season, and Carlos does not seem to be coping with it well. And the thing is, at the end of the day, Carlos has had a great career so far, and he's driven for some great teams. Toro Rosso, Renault, McLaren, now Ferrari. But this is the first proper year he has been in a car that is consistently good enough to fight for podiums and victories. In the other years, with McLaren, say, at certain races he had a car good enough for a podium, but most of the time it was only good enough for a 5th or a 6th. For Renault, at best, a 7th or an 8th. Same for Toro Rosso. And last year for Ferrari, again, same with McLaren, really. There were a few races where maybe he could have got a podium, but most of the time it was at best 5th or 6th place. This is the first proper year where he has to be, in terms of expectations, at least 3rd. That's a different kind of pressure. And certainly when Ferrari have a car like they have this year, which, I mean, the expectation is that they, certainly from Italy, of course, all of Italy supports Ferrari. It's a massive following they have, not just in Italy, but all across the world. The expectation is that they are going to be winning the championship this year. So, yeah, I think definitely struggling to cope with that. Again, because he's never been in a race-winning car before. I mean, he's never won a race before, but, I mean, main reason he's never won a race is because he's never been in a car good enough, really, until this year. So, yeah, just not coping well in that pressure. Either he will continue to, crumble under the pressure, and this contract extension will prove to be a mistake, and next year he'll be out of a drive at Ferrari, or he will get it together in a few races and will show the real Carlos Sainz. That's what's going to happen as a result of what's happened so far. Right, let's find a couple more. Those McLaren F1 racers, those speed trap, etc. times proof Merc has suppressed the porpoising, at least 75%. Guess so, a lot better straight line speed. Like I said a few weeks ago, Merc dialed down the engine. I think I don't think that's at all happened. There's no reason why you would dial down the engine at all. So I don't think that happened at all. I think definitely the porpoising has helped their straight line speed, but I don't think they've turn the power unit down at any point, because there's no reason to when you're in a position where you need to try and improve. No reason to be deliberately holding back pace. I think that's all the comments for now, but make sure, guys, to keep posting them in chat, and I'll make sure to come back for some more once I get through the rest of the teams. Now, let's go on to Alpine, who had a very good weekend in Spain, despite qualifying, which was very poor, where they were 12th and 17th, I believe. Both drivers complaining about the car. The car just didn't feel good for both drivers. But in the race, they were flying along. Alonso, of course, came from the very back to finish in 9th place. Good to see that they had a trouble-free race for once. And then Ocon, also another great performance. He has been also... say him and Tsunoda have been two drivers for me who have gone under the radar this season. They performed very well. Got points finishes, a few times now, but they're just not getting talked about. And I know I've been at times critical of Ocon, but I will admit this season he has been very good, for sure. He's scored points in... Is it every race this season now? I think it is every race this season, except for Imola, where he finished in 11th, I think, or 13th. Something like that. I think he finished in 11th, but dropped back because of a penalty. But Esteban Ocon has been very good this season and is 9th in the championship and is only, I think, less than 10 points away from 7th in the championship. So, yeah, let's put some respect on Esteban Ocon's name. But, yeah, coming into this Grand Prix, even though they did what they did in Barcelona, I just don't think this is quite an Alpine track. I think what we saw in qualifying was... Maybe they weren't as bad as that in reality. Maybe what we saw in the race was a bit closer to what their general pace was around a type of track like that. But if you look at this season so far, the tighter, Jesus Christ, the tighter and twistier is what I tried to say, the track, they do tend to be not as competitive. If you go look at, for example, the race in Jeddah, they were very competitive, and that's pretty flat out. Miami also, they were pretty competitive with Fernando Alonso, and Ocon even came, from the back to finish in the points. And there's quite a bit of fast, corners, fast straights there. I just think those are, the type of circuits where Alpine are going to be good. And I just don't think this circuit is really an Alpine track. But these two drivers are good enough to offset such a thing. And maybe we'll see over a single lap after what we saw in the race in Barcelona, maybe we'll see that actually the race pace they showed in Barcelona will be, or is actually now their updated speed. I think they did bring a few upgrades to the Spanish Grand Prix, but it definitely wasn't as many, I don't think, as other teams like McLaren and Alfa Romeo, I don't believe. So, yeah, I think Alpine, they'll be in the fight for points, but not massively. If it does rain, though, I think almost certainly, because of the quality of the two drivers, they'll finish in the points. I will say, though, Esteban Ocon, his record in Monaco is very good. The first year in Monaco wasn't great, but in 2018, he finished 6th. And then 2021, he qualified, was it 8th or 9th, and finished in 9th or 10th or something like that here in Monaco last year. So Esteban is very good here. Fernando will want to improve on what he did last year, where he was, I think, 17th in qualifying. And he still came through to get a decent result, considering the lack of overtaking that can be done in Monaco to come through to 13th. But yeah, I think that they will have a chance of a points finish, but I just don't think it's as likely as it will be at other tracks. Certainly, I think after this Grand Prix, I think you'll see Alpine become regular point scorers again once we get onto tracks which have a bit more, faster corners and, of course, more straights. Now, go on to Alfa Romeo, who I think really could be, and probably are, the dark horse of the weekend. certainly with this man on screen, Valtteri Bottas. Will we see this picture again, but around the streets of Monaco, him ahead of a Red Bull? It could happen. It could happen if, like I said, Perez and Sainz in the two Red Bull, or the Red Bull and the Ferrari respectively, if they're not quite consistently up there and at it and having a bit of a struggle, which we have seen, well, certainly with Perez in the past at Monaco, but certainly with Carlos Sainz so far this season, and with the two Mercedes still not being that far out of reach, I think Valtteri definitely has a good chance of a good result. I think at worst he'll be 7th on the grid for the Monaco Grand Prix. If he can, though, I think a 5th place would be realistically the best he could get. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he can get a 3rd, but I think realistically, given that we have to remember the other 4 drivers that I think will be contenders for, say, the final place on the podium are Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, Perez. Those are very high-quality drivers, one of them being a 7-time world champion. And then, obviously, Russell, probably a future world champion with a few championships, given the way he's been performing this season and the talent he clearly has. It's going to be very hard for him to beat all of them to, say, a 3rd place, but he will definitely, I think, be in that fight. But I think realistically, if he can capitalise on maybe a bit of lack of confidence from a couple of those drivers, given what's been going on this season, then I think, again, realistically, a 5th place would be a great result. And if he was to get that, then most likely, if it is dry for the Monaco Grand Prix, he would then probably finish in at least 5th place, which would be a fantastic result for the team. And you never know, it could, if Zhou Guanyu, who is on screen now, if he can deliver a decent result, it could be very good for them in the Constructors' Championship, because Alfa Romeo obviously right now are 5th, only 11 points behind McLaren. So if Bottas could get a top 5 finish, then they do need Zhou Guanyu to deliver something if they were to edge ahead of McLaren, or maybe even get level with the McLaren team. So hopefully we see another strong weekend for Alfa Romeo. Great to see, by the way, Alfa Romeo is so strong. It's the first time this team, it's pretty much Sauber really, with Alfa Romeo, badging and all that stuff. But it's really the first time we've seen the, I guess, Sauber team this competitive since like the end of, well, maybe 2018 you could say, but certainly the end of 2013 with Nico Hülkenberg, and of course 2012, which was, can't even believe I'm going to say this, 10 years ago was 2012. 2012 to me feels about 5 years ago at most, but time flies. So yeah, I think it's great to see Alfa Romeo back where they are, but I think one thing they desperately need is, like I said, they need Zhou Guanyu to be up there this weekend and getting a couple points for the team. I did give him a pass for the first 5 races because I think most of the time he did have a bit of bad luck with how things worked out in certain qualifying sessions. Like in Miami, he got blocked horribly, and then he got up. He had a good start, got up to like 12th or 13th, and then he had to pull out of the race with an issue. And then what else was it? Imola, he had very good pace, but he had to start from the back because he got hit by Gasly in the sprint race. Like I said, he's had a couple unlucky weekends, but last weekend I think was the first real poor weekend he's had of the season, qualifying in 15th, not really going anywhere, and then just retiring from the race with a problem. So this weekend he has got to perform. I think Zhou Guanyu, he has to show some good pace, and he's not going to be quicker than Valtteri Bottas because Bottas is a insanely quick driver. I know people may disagree with that, but I think him being teammates with Lewis Hamilton, I think hid how quick actually Valtteri is over a single lap. Plenty of times there were during their relationship, Bottas and Hamilton, where Bottas outqualified Hamilton around, like I said, some pretty famous circuits like Silverstone, Nürburgring, Imola. So, I think definitely Bottas is going to be too hard for Zhou Guanyu really to match. But if he can only be, 2 to 3 tenths off, that's probably going to see him in the top 10 or at worst 11th or 12th. But given the pace of the Alfa Romeo car, he can still come through and maybe with an overcut or an undercut, find his way up in the points. So he has to show some better pace this weekend because the car is good. There's no excuses about that. He just needs to deliver now. Hopefully he does. And hopefully Alfa Romeo's fantastic season continues in Monte Carlo. Now, next up, we'll go to the Haas F1 team. And Haas F1 had a very up and down weekend in Barcelona. 8th and 10th in qualifying, and then they just fell back horribly in the race. And of course, Magnussen collided with Hamilton on the first lap in Barcelona, which of course did not help. And he was basically out of the race, really, at that point. He did finish, but he was really out of contention in 17th place he ended up finishing. For Mick Schumacher, though, it was a bit of a shame because he got up to 6th and then just fell back horribly because, one, his pace wasn't great at all, and secondly, the Haas race pace was quite poor. Something we've seen for years now with Haas F1, that they just don't have a car that on race day can look after its tyres and perform well. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the way they build their suspension or the way the chassis is built, because I think it's still the case, isn't it, that Dallara built their chassis. If it's not, then make sure to correct me in the chat or the comments. But it's something about the Haas, the way they do things just doesn't result in them having a quick race car. They've never really had a quick race car. It's always really been with them that their peak is in qualifying and that you can't really expect any more from them after qualifying. I mean, this weekend, if they do go and get 8th and 10th in qualifying, it would be great, of course, because in Monaco, in the dry at least, it's very hard to lose the amount of positions they did in the race in Barcelona around Monaco, unless, you make horrible strategy mistakes or something like that. But, yeah, for this weekend, I think they'll be definitely very competitive with, say, McLaren, Alpine, maybe the second Alfa Romeo, Zhou Guanyu. I'm interested to see how Zhou does, but they will definitely be competitive for points. The hope for them is that they can get like 9th or better in qualifying, because if they do, then most likely, unless they make a massive error in the race or it's wet, then they'll probably end up finishing in the points and getting a couple, and maybe, if they get enough, get themselves ahead of AlphaTauri in the Constructors' Championship. For Mick Schumacher, though, again, in Spain, after what he did in qualifying, had to score points, but didn't. Ended up finishing in 14th. I will say, though, again, his race pace wasn't all down to him. I think he definitely has to play some role in it, because he is driving the car. But definitely the team, or the car that they built for him definitely isn't quite good enough on a race day, but also the strategy they put him on was quite bad. They tried to do a one-stop race, which around Barcelona, with these cars that can follow a lot quicker, a lot closer rather, and tend to degrade their tyres quite a bit quicker. To do a one-stop around Barcelona in 37 degrees plus of heat is insanity. So it wasn't all down to him in Barcelona, but here in Monaco, he has to finish in the points. He has to. Even if it rains, no matter what the conditions are, he has to finish in the points, because we need to start seeing Mick Schumacher showing that he is good enough for this level. What he did in Euro F3 and F2, he showed that he was good enough for Formula 1. Of course, last year, he had a couple races where, he got some very good qualifying results and showed that he was a lot better than what his car was at the time. But now that his car's good enough, he has got to start showing that he is good enough to not just be good enough to be in F1, but make something of his career. Because he's had chances this season to finish with the points, not taken them, and now finds himself under pressure to get those points finishes going. This weekend would be a great start, of course. His dad, and not just his dad, but his uncle had a fantastic record around this track. Michael Schumacher, of course, his father, won the race here in 94, 95, 97, 99, 2001. I think those are the times he won the Monaco Grand Prix, if I'm correct, which was, 5 times? And there were a couple other years where he probably would have won if it wasn't for other problems. But also, like I said, his uncle, Ralf Schumacher, was pretty good here. Ralf was on pole position here in 2003 in the Williams, and in other years, was high up, got a couple other podiums, I think he did in 2002. So, yeah, given obviously his family's history, it should run in the bloodline, having, success around Monaco. But given also that it's a circuit where really the best drivers show or separate themselves from the less good, it's got, this weekend has to be a weekend where he's got to show his quality, because it's going to get to that point. If he doesn't, then there's going to be a bit of not controversy, but there's going to be questions, I guess you could say, surrounding him as to whether he is actually good enough for Formula One, which I think he does have the talent, but we just haven't seen it so far this season. We haven't seen enough of it, I think, so far this season. He can definitely do a lot better than he's done so far in 2022. Now, on to AlphaTauri. I'm not going to be that slow with AlphaTauri. The car is pretty bad at the moment. Gasly can't really get to grips with it at all. He says the rear end just doesn't work on the car. It is one of the worst, or one of the more worst, I guess you could say, cars on the grid. Yuki Tsunoda, though, again, I've got to shout him out. I'm going to keep shouting him out for what he's doing this year, because nobody else is. He's having a very, very good season. Head of Gasly in the championship. Nobody would have thought that by race 6 of the season. And he's had how many points finishes now? 3, I think. What was it? 9th? Wasn't 9th, it was 8th, I think, in Bahrain. And then Imola, 7th, and a fantastic drive, by the way, in Imola, to come from, 13th or 12th up to 7th. And then, in Barcelona, he, outperformed Gasly and got a point for the team. And you can see right here, that's clear evidence that he was definitely ahead of Gasly in Barcelona. But yeah, Tsunoda has been very, very good this season, and I'm very happy to see that. Ever since the last race of last season, where he almost got a podium and ended up finishing in the end in 4th place, he has been very, very good, and I'm hoping keeps it up this weekend. Thankfully, it's another track where he should go well at, because, he's raced here before. So, yeah, Tsunoda, I'm expecting to be quite possibly the quicker of the 2 AlphaTauri drivers. I think it's going to be close between Gasly and Tsunoda. Because Gasly has performed well here in the past, it's going to be very tough for Tsunoda, because Gasly finished, 7th here in 2018, 5th in 2019, and 6th, was it, last year? That's a pretty good record for Gasly, considering he's not driven that many great cars in his F1 career. It will be pretty tough, but given his form so far this season, and given that Gasly's confidence is a bit down, it is possible. But when I can, I'm definitely going to give Tsunoda as many shout-outs as possible, and probably as well with Ocon when I can, because I think, again, those are 2 drivers who are not getting the recognition they deserve. Now, moving on to Aston Martin. We didn't really see that the new B car, the new green Red Bull, didn't really do anything, did it, in Barcelona? Sebastian Vettel almost nicked a point. He finished in 11th place. Still driving very well is Sebastian, even though his car is not that great. But yeah, Aston, for this weekend, I don't really see a great performance coming from them. Maybe Sebastian can outperform the car and drag it into a top 11, top 12. But I'd be very surprised if they got a points finish. I think if it does rain, it's more likely to happen in that case, but I don't think the Aston Martin car is quite good enough to be getting a points finish around Monaco. After this Grand Prix, though, I think you could see some decent results. But if they're going to get a good result this weekend, look out for Sebastian Vettel, because Lance Stroll hasn't got a great record here. I mean, he did finish 8th here last year. And he started the race from like 15th or something, and he did a very long first stint before he eventually pitted. So, had good pace in the end, but most likely, Sebastian Vettel is going to be the man if there is anyone to get the points for Aston Martin. And finally is Williams. And yeah, hopefully for Williams, it is a changeable conditions for qualifying or the race, because if it is, then I think Alex Albon, you could see him get a decent qualifying position. But if it's dry, I think Williams will finish at the very back, because there's just no way they can, fight their way up. The only thing really I can think of they can do in the race, if it is dry, is get 10-15 laps into the race and then pit and then just try and undercut as many cars as possible. And then if they can undercut their way up to a points position, then just stay out to the end. That's really the only thing they could do in the race. Other than that, though, I don't really see how they're going to get into a points-paying position. We saw in Barcelona, Williams just lacks a lot, really, compared to even the midfield teams. A lot of fundamental grip. A big reason why they're so high in the speed traps at times. Not because they have designed their car in such a way. I think it's because they just don't have a lot of downforce, which is why they're so quick in a straight line for a Mercedes-powered car. So, yeah, I think that is what's happening there. But I'll just quickly get on to a couple bits of news. Oh yeah, by the way, to update you guys, actually, I'll just move back on to these pictures quickly whilst I cover these couple bits of news. Kimi Räikkönen is returning to racing later this year in a one-off appearance, in NASCAR's Top Flight Cup Series at Watkins Glen. If you want to know when that is, that event, it is August 21st. So if you are an American, you can get yourself to Watkins Glen. Make sure to do so. Might get to meet the Iceman yourself. Bernie Eccleston arrested after gun found. That's not a big story. As well, the thing we talked about a couple of days ago with the cost cap situation, where the top teams want an inflation surcharge because of rising inflation around the world, and Christian Horner making the claim that some teams, or most of the teams, won't be able to do the last few races because they'll go over the cap. Rivals have said that he was exaggerating, which, to be honest, I thought so at the time. And McLaren, though, saying that sticking to the budget cap is pretty much impossible due to rising costs. And Andreas Seidel says that Formula One must find a way to adjust the budget cap. Again, though, and Otmar Safnauer, I think, made the point that, one, you should have adjusted for inflation because everybody knew, I think most people actually knew that we would get inflation this year from just an economic standpoint because of what's happened in the last couple of years of COVID and all of that. And at the end of the day, just spend less. It's not like they're going to go out of business if they spend, 5 million less than they were planning. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, there's one more story about the Spanish Grand Prix. That, what do you call it? With the Spanish Grand Prix, there were spectators complaining because of how hot it was. Apparently there was water shortages on, I think, the Sunday, the race day, and the water apparently at the circuit ran out just before the start of the race. The reason this was is because the circuit itself banned any bottle over, I think, 1.5 litres in terms of size, which I'm not sure I understand why they did that, because it was a very hot day. I just don't understand why that rule was made. I think for next year, they'll probably get rid of that, because when I went to the Spanish Grand Prix in 2014 and when I went to testing in 2019, I was allowed to bring a pretty big bottle, so I don't understand why that is. So yeah, again, don't understand that. And then, yeah, apparently a few people fainted, collapsed at the venue due to the heat. Of course, 37 degrees Celsius air temperature. On the ground, I don't even want to imagine. Probably your face is melting off at that point. Yeah, I can't even imagine what that was like. I remember when I went to the 2014 race on the Friday practice day, when we got back to the car, it said 36.5 degrees Celsius, and that was like 4:30 in the afternoon. Wasn't even peak, sunshine, or the peak time of the day, when the sun's at its absolute brightest and strongest. And it was very, very hot then. Thankfully, later that weekend, it got cooler, and even for the race day, it was overcast and only like 15, 20 degrees, thankfully. But, yeah. I do feel sorry for the people who had those shortages and went to the race and, had to suffer through that. I mean, when I went testing in 2019, even though it was I think it was very early March, because I went to the final 4 days of the second test. It was still in the day, it was still pretty warm. It was like 20 degrees for a couple hours in the afternoon, which is, again, someone who's from England like me, that is a pretty warm day, especially in like early March. So, and when you walk around that circuit, because there's elevation and you're having to walk up hills, in certain places, like when you go up to, like when you get into the circuit, you come out right behind the main grandstand, and you can either go left, which is down the pit straight and up towards turn 3, or you can either go right, which is up a hill, basically up past the final sector and up to what would be the exit of turn 10, which is that fast, pretty much flat out right-hander. So in that heat, I can't even imagine what it'd be like. I will say, if you were to walk past turn 3, probably the best place to be in that type of heat, because there's a lot of tree cover. But if I went to that race and it was that type of temperatures, I probably would have died. But let's read some final comments here before we come to the last bits. Hype for Monaco, just like every year, just going to put all my hype into Saturday and forget about Sunday. Well, if it does rain, then yeah, don't abandon the race too soon. Do you think Lewis will take his jury out? His exemption is over? Probably not. The jewelry thing is BS. I mean, the thing is, I can understand certain bits of jewelry in terms of like the earring, because it could catch, or even the nose ring. But in terms of like a fire hazard, the problem is it doesn't make sense. Not from a perspective about the rings, but from a perspective of, so Romain Grosjean, for example, when he was almost burnt to a crisp in Bahrain, he was allowed to wear his wedding ring, because I think they allow certain exemptions, like religious, like necklaces, or like if you had a religious type of ring on your finger or something like that, they allow exemptions. And Grosjean had a wedding ring on, and I don't believe Grosjean had on that finger particularly any like properly bad damage. I'll have to go back and look to see which hand it was exactly and how that all played out. But the thing is, if you're gonna say, oh, it's all about safety and, it's for the safety of the drivers, that's fine. But if you can't then allow exemptions for religious stuff and wedding rings, and I'm not saying that because I hate religion or anything. I mean, I'm not a religious person at all. But if it's a big safety issue, then even if you're religious and it means a lot to you, if it's that dangerous wearing them, then it should be for everything, not just certain things. I mean, myself, I have a nose ring in my right nostril, and then an earring with a cross dangling from it, and a necklace. So, I mean, I wouldn't be allowed to race in F1 if I could, but yeah, I don't understand why it's such a safety issue, but certain drivers are allowed to wear, religious stuff and all that, when, again, if it's such a safety issue, then surely it should bypass, religious exemptions and stuff like that, because, it should be all about safety at the end of the day. Man, wasn't there another Chaz channel? Yeah. A few years ago. My old channel was from it was called Chazza HD, just like this one is, but it was, I think this one has, the HD is in capitals when the previous one was in lowercase, the HD. What do you call it? Yeah, I did that from 2016 to midway through 2018, and then I got a load of copyright strikes. I decided to create this one, and yeah, got up to we're on 11,000 subs now. Of course, a lot of stop-starty situations in the last couple of years, which of course has affected the growth. But and there is someone in the chat here. Is it Nuclear Nick? I think it is. Says YouTube algorithm sucks for F1 channels. How does Chazza have so few subs? Makes no sense. I mean, it has got a lot better for F1 channels on YouTube. When I started, there wasn't that many people. For example, the end of 2017, it was like me. I only had like, a couple thousand, but me, F1 Word had just started, Chain Bear, of course, WTF1, and then maybe F1 Reviews, who's obviously now called Racing Reviews. I think he had just started at the time. And then the only other ones that I can remember, F1 Debate Show, I think it just started. I've been friends with those guys in the past. And then the only other people I can think of were probably the F1 Game YouTubers. But since then, it's grown, definitely on the real life side, it's grown by double, triple, quadruple since then. So thankfully, it's grown a lot more, because obviously helps other F1 YouTubers, and obviously helps Formula One in terms of its growth on this website and just in general. But yeah, like I said, I've had a stop-starty last 2 years or 2.5 years. Obviously 2020 I didn't really do that much content because I had a massive crisis in my life, basically. And then 2021, all I did really was race weekend content. And then this year, I didn't really start doing content this year because I had my router break and I couldn't really secure a new one for a few weeks. I didn't really start doing content this year until like a month ago. So yeah, those are some of the reasons behind that. But still 11,000 subscribers. I'm pretty happy with that. Especially given, like I said, what I've been through in the last couple of years. But if there's any other comments I can read out. Lightbringer says Alfa Romeo 1-2. I certainly would lose my voice at such an occasion. But I think I'll come to the end of the stream here, guys. Thank you very much for coming along to this Monaco Grand Prix preview. Great to have you all here as usual. So yeah, tomorrow I'll be live 3 times. Practice 1 watch along, that'll be getting going at 12:45 p.m. UK time on my channel. Second practice watch along at 3:45 p.m. UK time, and then the qualifying preview will be at 8 p.m. UK time. The qualifying preview is going to be, looking at practice 1 and 2, looking at how drivers did, looking through data, getting into historical data and how drivers have done in qualifying in the past, and giving you the best possible preview for, of course, Saturday, which, in course, in Monaco, it's the most important qualifying session of the season. So that is the plan for tomorrow, and of course plenty coming up on Saturday, Sunday, and even Monday for this Monaco Grand Prix. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button, share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And don't forget as well to join my Discord server, link below in the description for more content like this. But guys, until my practice 1 watch along tomorrow lunchtime, and again 12:45 p.m. my time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.